NCX Group, the leader in information security consulting, is proud to present Bite Size Security. Here now is NCX founder and CEO, Mike Fitzpatrick.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays from everybody here at NCX Group and Bite Size Security. I'm really excited to have our guest today, my friend and somebody that I really respect and look up to. We met probably, I think, about 14 years ago now when he published his first research project on the cost of a data security breach. And man, that was gold. It was the most incredible information I had ever seen in the early days of cybersecurity because it put a price tag on the cost of a data security breach. With that, I want to introduce my friend and guest, Dr. Larry Ponemon. Larry, how are you?
Oh, Mike, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the invite and that very kind introduction.
Well, it's hard to believe that our history goes back that far, as far as that initial report, and then the UCLA breach right after that, and the initial radio show that I was doing at the time. So, I mean, it's great to have gotten to know you and Susan through the years. So I'm excited that you're able to do this and share some information with the audience. As chairman of the Ponemon Institute, tell us a little bit about the Ponemon Institute and what its function and purpose is.
Right. Well, we are a research company primarily, and we are focused on certain topic areas, but they're all related to cybersecurity, data protection, privacy, and other related fields. We basically maintain a structure in the research that we do that allow us to do surveys at a very large scale, globally in many cases, to doing field-based research. We do benchmarking of organizations, cost studies like our cost of data breach. It's hard to believe it, but we're still doing it. It's still funded by IBM, so thank you, IBM. So we do a number of issues. We do about 80 titles every year. It keeps us pretty busy. We're a relatively small company, but we have I'm very proud to say, a great reputation in this space.
Well, I mean, I refer to the Ponemon Institute as the gold standard for all things, all trends and research related to cybersecurity and data privacy. And I'm just honored to be a distinguished fellow of the Institute, and I value that greatly.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just it is an incredible group, and the people that are part of it, the things that I learn from being involved and participating at the conferences is just fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It's a two-way street, Mike. We basically view our fellows community as our crown jewel. These are the best and brightest people in our space, and obviously including you. So we are delighted to have you as a distinguished fellow in the Institute, and hopefully this relationship will continue for many moons.
Well, exactly so. I mean, this has been a challenging year for everyone related to COVID-19, the shutdowns, and now the move to everybody working remotely. I mean, we're being asked to do things with technology that we've never even contemplated. I mean, with some of the pandemic planning and some of the business continuity planning that we do, there's never been a plan for, okay, in 24 hours, we have to set up everybody overnight working remotely. Go. There's no plan for that. There's part of, there's plans for disruptions here, disruptions there, but no one's got a plan for everybody working remotely for a year or 2 years or however long this is going to be. So with that in mind and what we're experiencing these days, I sat in on a few PricewaterhouseCoopers CFO conferences related to some of the things that they were seeing related to, cuts CFOs were making. So at the top of the list is real estate. They're seeing that remote workforce is working from a business productivity standpoint. I would argue that. But some of the things that they were seeing, so I was really piqued my interest with a recent study that the Ponemon Institute has just authored and released to the world on remote workforce. So, what was the emphasis of that study? Was it just the curiosity?
Yeah, great question. It's a number of factors, and those are kind of the reason for doing the research. Number one, and probably the most important factor is, as you mentioned, the sudden dramatic change in the way we do work. 24 hours to redefine your workspace, and we're talking about companies that are Fortune 100 size companies, talking about thousands and tens of thousands of employees, and the things that happen just so incredibly fast. And just as a novice looking at it from a psychological perspective, we said, this is going to be big, in some ways very beneficial, especially during the pandemic, but it's also going to be very costly in terms of changing the way we think about our life, how we do our work, how we share the work product that we do, and then, of course, having security and privacy as a core. So that's the reason for the research. And we're still doing more research around telework. Some of it is very positive, but again, unfortunately, it's a big issue, and there are people, organizations that take advantage of folks who are working from a home environment. But people who are working from a home environment may not be as knowledgeable around security or privacy control, and as a result, bad guys could take advantage of it more easily. That's another study that we're doing, but we think the impact can be enormous.
Well, I think that's going to be a really interesting companion piece to this. Now, this study, as I went through and I was reading the detail of it, it seemed to be, since everybody was at home, you got a larger cross section of people to interview or take the survey this time.
Right. Yeah, we basically have, because we needed to make sure that our sample was representative of the population at large. And who are the people affected by telework? There are people who aren't necessarily security or IT agents who basically have backgrounds in marketing and accounting and all these other fields. And so there's a big burden on people having learned more new things and change the way they're doing things. And we basically felt that this is going to evolve some ways in a very positive. But the issue isn't completely negative. The security issues are very serious, but there's a way to do things that to make this a more secure, more enjoyable environment. A lot of us get a little nervous when we're on a conference call and the dog starts barking in the background, as you probably heard a couple of minutes ago, or a baby's crying, or your neighbor is turning up the radio and you're listening to someone else's program. These kinds of issues do affect work, but for the most part, there are ways to circumvent some of these negative features.
Well, I know from personal experience with a friend of mine. His company, he's got 900 employees, and he's got another business venture that does funding for his subcontractors. Basically, they were hit with a business email compromise and experienced, fraud for about $23,000. So you have some of that that's really on the rise and increasing as a result of this. So let me ask you this: what was the most surprising finding in the report to you?
I think the number one finding that was probably the most serious was the fact that so many people are working from a home environment. They receive very little training from their host company. In other words, the company said, okay, you're going to work from home on Tuesday computer or your company assigned laptop, and there was very little instruction. People were just kind of given minimal amount of information. They had to figure things out for themselves. And interestingly enough, these are organizations that are, think about things flimsy or cheap or, not spending time with employees. But they felt the pressure. They had to get something off the ground. It was pandemic as a motivator. And the end result is things were not communicated very well to many people. And as a result, there's been a lot of dysfunctions. There's an example of e-dismissal rates, a rise in the number, the frequency of malware attacks, brute force attacks, ransomware. All of these areas have actually increased and continue to increase at an accelerated rate.
Well, I mean, definitely the phishing attacks have increased. I mean, the ransomware, the phishing. The difficulty is that, from my experience in the trenches, cybersecurity typically, from an assessment standpoint, always follows behind IT. But the problem is IT has never settled. They're constantly making changes right now.
Exactly. The IT environment is really under a lot of pressure to make the whole process invisible to the end user. So that when they turn on their laptop, the wallpaper is, their home, nice colored. So, but other than that, they basically are doing things that are productive for their company. Most people, they start out actually liking working from a remote location, preferably maybe your home, because, in some ways, you wake up in the morning, you don't have to put on a business suit, you don't have to shave, things will be gross. You can't go to a restaurant anyway, so forget about that.
Exactly. As long as the guy wears pants during the Zoom call, I think we're all okay.
I think this has happened to most of us. Like, for example, I've done a lot of Zoom call meetings and so on. And, you wear a nice shirt, maybe even put on a tie. But if you get to put on your dress slacks, you're sitting there in your underwear.
Exactly.
And of course, the camera. And whoops, I'm sorry about that. So it's probably happened to both of us. And at this point, I'm not embarrassed. It's the reality of the new work. The definition of work means that you don't have to wear pants, I suppose.
Well, I mean,
kind of
it's definitely different. I think this year, 55 or 60 speaking engagements that were canceled as a result of COVID, and that has now prompted the development of a home podcast studio in order to be able to communicate and at least help some of these small businesses that are out there that are really struggling with this. I sat in, I'm sure you're familiar with Vistage, right? The CEO group.
Yes.
So I was asked to set in on one of these Vistage CEO peer-to-peer groups, early days of COVID, and maybe answer some cybersecurity questions. One of my friends is a chair for this CEO pod, and it was truly interesting and insightful. There's so many people that think that CEOs are really grateful for COVID to a certain extent because they can reduce costs and they don't have to have employees in the office, and that they're only thinking about the money side of it. The thing that was interesting takeaway from that particular session was the discussion around two elements. One of the businesses in the room had been in business for 18 years in the hospitality space, and in a matter of a month and a half of COVID, he was gone. He was out of business, completely gone. Just devastating. The other side of this that was really abundantly clear in sitting in that group is how much these CEOs, and I mean, most people don't realize that CEOs and leaders of organizations are kind of isolated to begin with, because you can't just be a regular guy, a regular person within the company. You've got roles and responsibilities, and sometimes that separates you from those around you to a certain degree. And especially as CEO, it can be a lonely existence. And the thing that the CEOs in this particular group were discussing is just how isolated they feel, because they can't just have the casual conversation with somebody as they bump into them in the office, or go, "Hey, you want to go grab some lunch?" Or just the spontaneity of it. That is far more, I think, far more what leadership is feeling these days. I don't know if any of that came out in the survey at all.
Yeah, great question. Great comment, I should say. But we did see that it wasn't actually one of the survey questions, but in debriefing respondents, to do a deeper dive in some cases, we saw the psychological issues as being enormous. And what was one of the top negative aspects was basically exactly what you said: being disconnected, and not being able to reach out and actually do lunch or have an in-person one-to-one meeting, or just brainstorm, use a whiteboard. Now you could do this in a technical sense. Some of this collaboration can be done in a platform like Zoom and others, but it's not the same. And that isolation starts to step in. It becomes, I think, has a very significant effect, negative effect on work productivity. So we're actually starting to see that. What we found is not a study with a benchmark. Before we did this study, kind of an interesting finding. Within the first 3 weeks of telework, we asked people to rate their experience on a positive, negative scale. It's a little more complicated than that, but just very simply, we had to put an X on a line from 1 to 10. So some people might say my productivity is good. I'm going to rate myself as a 7, or an 8, or a 9, or a 10. Or my productivity is bad, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And we found that in the first 3 weeks, people were rating their productivity about 7 plus as an average. Now, about 3 months after that, still teleworking, that number is about 4 or 5 in terms of productivity. And we actually did a statistic that may get published in the Wall Street Journal. And we thought it kind of interesting that even those people who are gone home initially and very positive to the idea of working from home, that I think they now realize that the long term this could be depressing. Not as much fun as work used to be.
No, and we've got a college age son, and the lack of being able to get the labs that he's needed, because that requires being there in person, to really be able to do hands-on and be able to work with colleagues and projects, and especially the relationships that you build in college. It's difficult. So he's been home since March, and it looks like next semester, spring semester, is going to be remote as well. So it is challenging on everybody. I think one of the challenges that I saw in the report, or that the Institute did, is security budgets, IT security budgets, and expertise. It says 45% of the respondents of the organizations, their IT budget is adequate for managing and mitigating cyber risk caused by remote workers, but only 39% of the respondents of their organizations had the expertise to manage and mitigate risk associated with cybersecurity. I know there's a lot more detail under that. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. The general idea is that, and we all know we need resources to do security, to do privacy, to basically do things that are absolutely essential from a data protection perspective, or protecting our critical infrastructure. So the general view of respondents is that it's not horrible. Getting a 45% response on a 100-point scale. That's not a hugely negative finding, but it suggests that there should be more spending. Then we looked at what was actually done in terms of the allocation of budget, and there we saw problems that were much more significant. I think you said 39%, but we basically found that organizations weren't necessarily funding, or if they were funding the wrong things. And looking at more traditional workflow issues and thinking about building their security infrastructure in telework to resemble what was done in kind of an on-premise or cloud environment. And things are not getting better; they are getting worse in terms of the ability to secure funding. So that continues to be a big problem. But if we can go back, I wanted to tell you a story. You mentioned your son.
Yeah.
I know he's doing well. In Nevada, if I recall, Reno.
Right.
Very good. But my son got his PhD last year from Stanford in mechanical engineering. Really smart kid, but man, not a kid. He is all people who graduate with a PhD go be a professor. So he has his first teaching research gig in Boston. He's never had to actually have a face-to-face meeting with the university that he works for. They do everything Zoom or Zoom-like, and he collaborates and does research with them. But he never physically traveled to the university.
Wow.
But that is so weird. But that's the kind of the new normal. But it was kind of interesting when that doesn't bother him. What bothered him the most about the pandemic is you look forward to your graduation. In his case, he went to school his whole life, got his PhD. It's grade 17, a long haul. But the school had a Zoom graduation, which I thought was pretty cheap, and I couldn't even get into the system. So that's another story. So it does change when we think about work, and more importantly, how we live our life. It's not just a workflow issue; it's also a life issue in terms of how do we want to work and how much isolation can we take. This is cruel punishment in some cases. So
well, no, I was just gonna. I was just gonna say. I mean, I'm definitely concerned about the kids, and I know we're diverting a little bit from IT, but Larry, I got a couple of young men that I worked with from the time that they were 6 years old in Scouts. Both are Eagle Scouts. They're 17 right now, and they attempted suicide in the last 3 months. I mean, this stuff is no joke, and the mental health aspect of it, definitely has a play in it. So for the business leaders that are listening to this podcast, please do everything that you can to reach out to your people, touch base with them more frequently, make sure that they're doing well, make sure that they have what they need. I know a lot of business owners are doing that above and beyond, but it really is critical in this remote environment that is going to unfortunately continue for a while, I'm afraid. So we have to think outside the box. We have to think a little bit differently. We have to be a little bit more conscious. I can't say the word today. Of the people that we work with, and so one of the getting back to cybersecurity. How do you think 2021 will look? What are you seeing as trends, and what direction this is all going?
A great question. Recently the SolarWinds hack, and many other hacks that seem to happen on a routine basis. Security is not the invisible thing anymore. People recognize that to run a business of any kind, you need to have a level of security that is at least reasonable. It doesn't have to be perfect. Some of these hacks suggest that even great organizations are not doing enough to create a secure environment. So I think in 2021, unfortunately, this is my projection and prediction that will hold me to this sense that I think, I believe, that things are going to get worse. That there'll be more hacks, more intelligent hacks that will result in information and intellectual property being stolen, I think we're going to see more, I hate to say this, but more nation state attacks because it's, war can be fought in the, virtual computer environment. But it can be very damaging, very costly to an organization or, the country as a whole. I think some of that will happen. I think that those people who are doing teleworking temporarily, many of those organizations are going to make it permanent because, as you said, the cost savings, at least on the surface, suggests that working from a home office can be very healthy for your bottom line. Sick for the top line, but it's healthy in terms of creating a positive income. So the end result is that my guess is in 2022, things will start to get back to like a normal. It won't be what it used to be, but it's going to be more interaction, less isolation. I think there's quite a bit of research that's being done around psychology, the cognitive capabilities that people are affected by isolation. And I think the more we deal with that issue, the better it's going to be for companies as well as whole countries that are dealing with this issue on a macro scale.
Well, I mean, it is going to be a challenge, folks, in 2021. I mean, there's no doubt about it. If you need to look at your security, and again, I'm going to be posting a lot of show notes, a lot of additional resources, things that you can do for free. And I mean, one of the things, Larry, that I want to do with this podcast is really focus on, what I call the Fortune 5 million, the businesses with 100 employees or less, because they don't have the in-house expertise. They barely have full-time IT most of the time. Those folks are the ones really struggling here. So if there were a couple of foundational ideas and areas that you think they should focus on, what do you think they should be?
It's a great question, by the way. You're really good at this. That's one we're going to hear. I think foundational. I think that from a security/technology perspective, there are certain tools that would really enable higher level of security that are, for the most part, invisible to like the end user. And so I'm a big fan, as you know, Mike, in encryption. Big encryption technologies, have been essential to create a stronger security environment. I think the breakthroughs in encryption and cryptological technologies, I think, will be very helpful for the teleworkers to maintain security. I think having the ability to reach out to others in an organization, so, even though it's a telework environment, more one-to-one interaction, with people in the organization, bringing people together, building a stronger, better infrastructure. I know I use Zoom quite a bit. It's great, but a lot of these technologies are not all that reliable, or we're not used to it. I think we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, not going, we're going to see with a nice sports coat. They're not wearing slacks because no one's going to see you below the waist. Those things will change. We'll want people to, feel like they are more in a more work-related environment. So I think those kinds of things will be important. But some of the psychological issues will probably have to be implemented on an organization-wide basis. We'll call upon human resources and other parts of the organization to get involved to ensure that there's a more secure environment that's not necessarily just like only security, but also really other aspects of work.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for the words of wisdom and everything that you do. And those are all the questions I've got for right now. I mean, we could do this another hour, but there's Christmas shopping that has to be done on my end. So, Merry Christmas to you and Susan and the family, and happy holidays.
Thank you, sir. a blessed Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and look forward to doing a part 2.
You bet. We are going to do part 2. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's our guest, Dr. Larry Ponemon from the Ponemon Institute. It's always a pleasure. I just want to close today by saying, again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to everybody out there, from my family to yours. We really wish the best for you in the new year. We wish health and well-being and success. Let's move from survival mode to thriving again. With that, this is Mike Fitzpatrick for Bite Size Security. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Bite Size Security, presented by NCX Group. For the latest updates in information security, please visit our site at ncxgroup.com. NCX Group can also be found on Facebook and Twitter as NCX Group. Thanks for listening.